Hi, I'm Mallie Shansfeld, Managing Editor for MedMark Media, the publisher of Endodontic Practice US, Implant Practice US, Orthodontic Practice US, and Dental Sleep Practice. Welcome to a live presentation and question and answer with Mike Hague. In our webinar today, we will be exploring how Weave's software is giving dentists nationwide the tools they need to manage their offices despite daily unpredictability. No matter how much you modify the ways you interact with customers, deliver services, and secure revenue, Weave provides the flexibility for you to adapt and keep your business running. Before we get started, I'd like to invite viewers to use the question box in your control panel to ask any questions, and your questions will be answered at the end of the session. And watch for a special promotional price for viewers of this webinar. I'm pleased to introduce our guest, Mr. Mike Hague. Mike is a knowledgeable, energetic Weave product specialist who pioneered Weave's first ever dental specialty team. His team is dedicated to helping specialty dental offices all over the country strengthen and streamline their everyday operations through the Weave platform. We're happy to welcome Mike to our webinar today.
Mallie, thanks so much for having me on today. I really do appreciate it, and especially for anybody attending this webinar today. We're kind of going through a strange little time, so even taking an extra couple minutes to spend with me today, talking about Weave and talking about some of the trends in the industry, I really do appreciate that. Like Mallie said, use the question bar if anybody has any type of a question. I just wanted to give you guys a real quick backdrop on Weave and kind of how we started and what we did to kind of start a specialty team. And We've started 11 years ago. We started as a dental specific company, and over those last 11 years, the last 2 or 3 years have been a lot of endodontists and periodontists and prosthodontists and oral surgeons, orthodontists that have come in and said, hey, we kind of want some of the same functionality that these offices are using. And so we actually created a specialty team about 18 months ago, and that specialty team is completely dedicated to selling to specialty offices and providing those services to specialty offices. So this is usually, and this is my quarantine haircut, so hopefully everybody isn't too embarrassed by me at this point. And if there's a kid that walks in the back, I apologize during this. But this is actually a presentation that I actually do at a lot of the events that I speak at, where we go and talk to specialty offices. So I hope you gather something from this today that is beneficial. And the whole idea of this presentation, I don't like to give everything away when it comes to this presentation, is the fact that the world is absolutely changing. And so I kind of like with my presentations to tell a couple stories, talk about some functionality, but more importantly, it's talking about some of the trends in the industry, things that are actually happening. And so the title of my presentation is The Millennial Disruption in Specialty Offices. And this is something that's very interesting. And a lot of offices say, well, our patients are a certain age demographic. They, they don't text, or they do text, or we're seeing more texting in the industry. I called my mom probably 3 weeks ago, and she answered the phone and said, well, why don't you just send me a text? And I think it was the first time that I kind of realized, like, hey, things are kind of changing when it comes to the way people are actually communicating. So this millennial disruption, the reason I bring up the millennial disruption is because this is not something that's privy to the millennial demographic now. It's privy to everybody. And so I'm going to unshare my webcam real quick. Actually, I'm just going to keep it up. Let's just keep it up. So the way that I talk about this is essentially just with the disruption in specialty offices, how this is affecting communication, and some of the things that I think that are very beneficial, especially with the volume that we've been doing the last few months with COVID-19 and some of the things that have been going on. We'll kind of dive into this now. So I remember a couple of years ago was my first trip to New York, and I actually took a trip to New York. One of the things that I remember from Friends and Seinfeld was the fact that people could actually just raise their hand, they could jump in a taxi, and it was all good. The person would jump out, they'd grab your baggage, they'd put it in the trunk, and you were able to then just go wherever you wanted with a taxi. And so that was my expectation. I remember raising my hand, someone pulled up, and this is essentially what happened. So I remember them pulling up. I was actually raining outside, but they showed up. I thought they were actually going to be the ones that were going to get out, grab my bags, put it in the cab, just like some of the shows had shown. And this is what I saw. I saw essentially a trunk that was filled with garbage. He popped the trunk, I put my luggage in. I got in the car, and this was interesting to me as well. If you can see there, the 4M84 complaint. I got in the taxi. I took a picture here. It wasn't a matter of if I was going to complain. It was a matter of when I was going to complain. And so they actually put this in the cab saying that when you complain, here's the number to actually call. Here's our badge number for this particular cab. And I thought that was interesting. Now in 2012, this medallion, this is actually the medallion that back in the day used to be very, very popular. This was the taxi medallion in 2012 that was very, very popular. You can see 2011, 2013 on here. This medallion in 2011, 2013, 2012 was worth over $1 million. And so it was a terrible experience for me. It was my first experience with the taxi. I thought it was going to be the best experience ever. And I remember just being very, very disappointed with that experience. That's right when I graduated college. I just barely kind of moved on with my life, and I wanted to take my first taxi. Well, now my next trip to New York was with Uber. And I remember getting to the airport and someone saying, hey, there's this new application. You can hail a Uber, which is essentially a taxi. Now I remember getting in the car, so I hailed this Uber. I remember getting in the car, and there were actually water bottles that were ready for me. My driver actually got out, put all of my luggage into the system. I actually had a low battery, and the Uber driver was able to say, hey, I actually noticed since it's plugged into my system that you actually have a low battery. Do you want to plug your system in? And so I was able to plug my phone in. And then I was able to pay my entire bill with my phone. And so it was very different. Now, just following this, so there's the receipt. So just following this, my wife actually had then traveled out. It was her first time. It was 2017. She'd gone to Boston, and she landed in Boston, and she said, hey, how am I supposed to get to my hotel? I don't want to get a taxi. What do you suggest? Should I rent a car? I just said, get an Uber. And I remember her being terrified, very scared. Oh, I don't want to get in a stranger's car. And she actually called me right after that and said, oh my gosh, you were completely right. They had water bottles in the car. I was able to pay my bill. I was able to give a tip through the app. And so as you can see, things have absolutely changed with this transportation industry. And for those of you on the call that are saying, what does this have to do with dental or specialty or anything like that? There is a reason, and I'll kind of get into that. So with essentially what's happened with the taxi industry is since January of 2012, all the way to August 2014, the average monthly number of trips per cab went from about 1,400 all the way down to about 550. And if you look at the actual way of Q1 2014, cab rides controlled about 37% of the actual transportation industry there. Rental cars took about 55%, and then rideshare only had about 8%. Now, Q1 of 2018, so fast forward just 4 years, this was the discrepancy there as far as everything there. Was cab rides then went from 37% to 6%. Rental cars went down to 23.5%, and rideshare had significantly taken over that to 70.5% of the actual transportation or community transportation there in San Francisco. So it completely changed. Now fast forward, this medallion now since 2012 has gone from $1 million to this industry has now gone to an $85,000 medallion. So if you're a new cab company owner, you can now buy this medallion for $85,000 instead of having to pay $1 million for that medallion. Now it's interesting, they didn't stop at that. I hope I get a little bit of a laugh from some of you here. They then went to scooters. So Uber then came out and said, hey, we're going to offer scooters that people can rent and they can go ride them around the city. And so they've now transitioned one more time to let's not stop at cars, let's go to scooters. The next is they actually then said, I was actually in Vegas, and I remember putting in an Uber because I was in Vegas. And if you can see here, self-driving fare. So it went from cab to Uber to scooters to self-driving fare. So now you can actually have somebody come to your spot with a self-driving car And this was actually a picture, I can't claim this picture. This is actually a picture that one of my friends took. But they actually got in the car, and this person at that same time turned around and said, please don't take pictures. But this was the technology. So this Uber that was on demand, self-driving, actually took my friend to a location without a single person driving that car. So this is what it looked like. So this is the person that's actually seeing that now, to where they're turning around saying, hey, please don't take a picture. This is what the car actually looked like. I'm from Utah, so we obviously have Park City, Sundance, a lot of these really popular areas. Why there's no need to actually get a transportation car ride from the airport now. Why not just use a helicopter? And so you can actually now Uber a helicopter to go to wherever you want to go. So the reason I talk about this is even within the last 3 months, I don't like to talk a lot about COVID-19, coronavirus, things like that when I'm on demos. But the fact of the matter is the industry is absolutely 100% changing. And you can see that just over these 5 or 6 years since everything's taken place with the transportation industry, there was 4 changes. And so the reason I like this, talking about some of these things is because the industry is 100% changing as far as communication, how people want to communicate. Now, there's other companies that are doing this. You guys are all familiar with this. My wife has spent thousands and thousands of dollars since, we've all been in lockdown on Amazon. How about Netflix? My kids are on Netflix right now. So if I have a bad stream, it's probably because of them. Spotify, no need for CDs anymore. No need for putting anything in like that. No need for actually downloading or purchasing music anymore. You can just actually have a subscription to Spotify. Uber, like we talked about. DoorDash, don't want to look at the bill that I've spent on those for the last 3 or 4 months. Tinder, now you can actually date people by just swiping right or left. So things are changing. And this is where that millennial disruption, you could say that my mom maybe wouldn't order anything from Amazon 3 months or 3 years ago, but now it's an integral part of what she actually does. My wife's 100% a millennial, so we could put her in that bucket, but things are starting to trickle into those other industries. Now you can see here over time, the age gap is completely changing. And whether it's someone that needs a root canal or someone that needs a pair of braces, whether it's their parent or the patient themselves, they're falling into that millennial bracket. And so you can see that over time since 2015 and then all the way to 2050, if you can look, that 75% of the people will actually be millennials. Instead of them being like baby boomers, where it's going to basically drop to, close to 18, 17% at that time as well. So what I like to talk about is this happened in about 2016, where this trend started to actually take place. And we saw it within dental communication. We saw it within, technologies like Tinder, Grubhub, DoorDash, everything like that. And what I would like to talk about is just the ability for leaders to have the ability to anticipate trends well in advance of their competitors. And I'll talk about something just kind of quick here as far as the current situation that we're kind of in, and maybe it was a little more relevant about a month and a half ago, but we actually started to see this with our company at Weave. 8 weeks ago, everyone was kind of saying, we don't really have time to set anything up right now. We don't know. It's kind of up in the air. 4 weeks ago, they were saying, we have actually some downtime now. Let's get it signed up. And now we have people knocking our door down saying, hey, now's a good time for us to essentially start implementing some of these things that we've tried to implement, but not only that are a nice to have, but are absolutely necessary in today's changing world. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the millennial consumer factors that we're actually seeing. So as of right now, 100% of millennials, and I would say probably for any other demographic, I don't have the information for it, 92% of those own a smartphone. 50% of those people that are under 35 would rather interact with companies digitally. So people are starting to want to talk through text messaging, through communicating that way rather than getting a phone call. I always talk about this, that if someone calls me, there's a really good chance I'm not going to pick up. If they send me a text, there's a really good chance that I actually respond. And that's just the millennial movement there. So 92% own a smartphone. 50% of those people less than 35 would rather interact with companies digitally. Why is this? Well, time is money. And people nowadays, even though we've all been in lockdown and quarantine for the last little bit, people still value their time, and time is money. Today's consumer has very, very, very high expectations. They want to have the ability to communicate with their companies anytime they want to, but also if they have a negative experience, they will then tell that company that they've had that negative experience, and also a lot of other people on Google and Facebook. It's just the way that people are communicating now. One of the other things is reducing barriers to pay. Millennials and kind of this generation has now become very cost aware. They want to have instant access to compare. So keeping your reputation management up, your website, your listings online, things like that. So having that instant access to compare as well. Also, they're more loyal to companies that actually will give back and contribute to social causes. So this is also something that I think a lot of companies are starting to do with this as well, is, you know, with everything going on, being loyal to those companies that will actually go the extra mile to give back to social causes. One of the other things that they crave is connection. Millennials in this day and age, and it's starting to trickle out into these other demographics, is craving connection. They want to crave connection. What I talk about with this is after hour communication. So a business that maybe closes at 5 o'clock and someone wants to talk to that company at 7:30 or that office at 7:30, they want a response, and they want a short response time. And so that's the way that these people are starting to communicate. Now, I will say just real quick, I'll give a plug to Weave. We have probably one of the most popular products in the dental industry right now, which is our mobile app. And this mobile app actually allows you to take your entire office phone system, and rather than me unsharing my screen, I'm just going to talk to you about it. And if you're a customer of ours, you can actually then chat in and give us a message here. But we actually allow you to take your entire phone system to your house, and you can operate your entire phone system from the couch of your house. All of your patient information is in there. And the best part about that is it's coming from the office phone number. So we're not violating the privacy of an office manager or a staff member or the doctor, but we then can actually take all of that information. And those are the types of things where now we're actually pushing this to helping these offices establish this after hour communication with their patients as well. Now, this is my friend, Mike Buckner. He's one of our dear friends here at Weave. These are his twin boys. And this is a feature that we actually released about 2.5 years ago. It's one of our most popular features, and it's especially important right now because a lot of offices were shut for a while, and a lot of volume is now coming into the phone system at the offices. And so one of the boys, right after this, he told me the story, fell out, cut his chin, and I think he kind of chipped one of his teeth. And this was one of the coolest things that I've ever seen, to where Mike Buckner called and he jumped on Google, just like any of your patients would right now. Been in lockdown for a while, need a root canal, or need a pair of braces. And so this Mike Buckner, he actually searched on Google, pediatric dentist in Lehigh, Utah. We're based out of Utah. And these are actually all of the listings that came up. And you can see right there at the top, Alpine Kids Dentistry, 151 5-star reviews. Now, his wife was the one making the phone call. There was the phone number, 385-345-4117. And when his wife made that call, sorry, I have a video playing on my system because that's typically what I have on this. But when his wife called that office, it got to the voicemail. They recorded the voicemail, and 93% of people, if they're calling your endo office or your ortho office or your prosto office or your perio office or your oral surgery office for the first time, there's a 93% chance that that person will not leave a voicemail with your office. Now, there's two types of things that will happen. They'll either call on to the next office, so they'll hang up and say, I'm going to go on to the next office, or they'll actually hang up and then dial right back. I always joke with my offices about this. I call them rage dialers, where they'll just hang up, call right back. Now, his wife was essentially about to call onto the second office, Dry Creek Pediatric Dentistry. Now, you're seeing on my screen here, This is how long it took. 5 seconds when they hung up that voicemail to where she received a text message from that office that was customized for that time of day. I believe it was after hours, but I'm not 100% sure. But the cool thing about this is it said something like, "Hi, this is Christy with Alpine Kids Dentistry. I saw you called, but I'm assisting one of our patients at the moment. I will call you back in 3 to 5 minutes. But you can also text me back to let me know how I can help you." This is actually something that was being very heavily utilized by our offices right now, which is something called missed call text, to where when that person calls your office, they hang up on the voicemail. We can actually trigger a text message that goes to that patient. And you can say something like, "Sorry, we missed your call. We're currently helping out another patient. If you're a patient of record, we know you called, we'll call you right back. If you're a new patient, send us your name." And that person can then text the office right back, and we show it right on the screen when that person actually, and if we have a little bit of time during the question and answer, I'm happy to kind of show you how that actually looks. But this is something that's actually very popular right now, especially with high volume of phone calls, if someone possibly misses a phone call in the office. One phone call for an ortho office, $6,000 to $8,000, depending on your market. And we've had offices and some of our longtime customers that are very popular names in the industry that are using this feature. And they say this feature alone possibly will actually save 60 to 90 minutes in their office. Now, communication. Communication is something that we cannot get away from right now. And it's something that is obviously in the last 3 or 4 years has become abundantly more present, right? Now, last year I took my wife to Hawaii. This is my wife. She's beautiful. I do love her. We have a baby on the way. We had a great time. We went out there, played a little bit of golf, went to some luau's. Everything was great. She's obviously way out of my league here. But I remember being out there and her saying, "Do you have to work on this trip?" Now, it was a work trip, so I was during the day working. But I remember at this luau actually looking down and seeing that I had 1,353 emails. And so it's something that we can't escape. Now, back in the day, the way that we used to communicate was this, and anybody would probably understand and see exactly what this is. You would come inside, you would check your voicemails, you would then go in and check your mail, grab it out of the mailbox. I remember my parents doing this when I was growing up. I don't really deal with that anymore. My wife does most of our mail, if there is any mail. But we are bombarded at all times when it comes to social interaction, communication, notifications, friend requests, everything like that as well. The average person, and I don't have the slide for this, so I don't remember exactly, but I do believe it's about once to every 3 to 5 minutes per day that you see some sort of advertisement or something that is on your phone. And so we get about 100 to 145 notifications as the average person. And this is always one of my favorite slides to show because the phone on your actual cell phone is the 5th most used app. So it's actually the cell phone. It's the 5th most used app on the actual cellular device. You also have 109.5 texts a day. So the average consumer is sending about 110 text messages and then voicemails of 4.8 response rate. So people not only are leaving less voicemails, but they're actually responding less to those voicemails as well. Now, this was a picture. This is kind of our crew. I'll kind of explain here. So you'll see the 2 guys in the back. That's Daniel and Mary, and we have Mike Buckner there that I was mentioning earlier. This was a dinner that they went to in Park City last year, and they were all hanging out. And he mentioned that right at the beginning, it was a great dinner. Everyone was talking and everyone was communicating, but this is where the millennial disruption starts to trickle in to every single demographic age group. Is by the end of the night, everyone had their phones out. And so everyone's starting to talk and communicate that way. And that's the way that things are happening. So the millennial movement is basically, don't call me, don't make me wait, don't leave me a voicemail, I want a text. 61% of that millennial group, or also trickling into some of the other groups, is going to change to a more tech savvy provider based on them having better technology than their other systems. So that is basically the way that that people are starting to communicate. Now, there's something with this. I always say, what's the significance of this number? And I would challenge everybody on this call. I challenge every one of the doctors, the offices that I talk to. You know, people are always talking about price, and they're talking about, well, I want to make sure that my overhead's low. 211, what is the significance of that number? I'm asking that question rhetorically, but I'm letting you know that that is on the verge of boiling. And I think a lot of offices are in this situation right now to where they've done a really good job, obviously, with production and technology, and they're really, really close. And this isn't a plug for Weave. This is a plug for just enhancing everything in the office that you have, because I've seen a lot of other great services out there. But I will say that the temperature of 212 does change that significantly. And so one of the things that I would just kind of recommend and say is, do you want to be a 211 degree office or a 212 degree office? The difference between good and great is just a little extra effort. And then with the communication and the way that people want to communicate now is, people won't remember what you did or said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that's one of the most important things that I think is very popular with the way that communication is happening today. And so my recommendation would be, do you guys want to be the New York Medallion Taxi Cab Company of 2012, or do you want to move that forward and start investing in technology and doing things like that to significantly push forward the production at your offices, the efficiency of your offices for that as well? So I'm Mike with Weave. I appreciate the time here. We do have some question and answer that I think Mally's going to handle here. So if there's any questions from the audience, and then I do believe we just have a question and answer regarding some things with Weave as well. So Mally, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, well, thanks, Mike. I'll again invite our viewers to use the question box in your control panel to ask any questions that you have. We have some questions. Why is now an opportune time to invest in a platform such as Weave?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's probably one of the best questions that I think could be asked on this. And the reason is, and we've seen this trend, and we could show you numbers and everything over the last several months, but I think everyone in their mind is thinking, I need to be able to work remotely. I need to be able to digitally take my communication platform, whether it's with my office staff or whether it's with my patients, and I need to be able to remotely do that. And so more now than ever is the demand for people being able to prepare themselves for possibly the next something that happens like this. God forbid that happens. But I think now people are starting to realize that if I'm going to take that, one of the things that I need to do is prepare myself for those situations. And then on the top of that is just capitalizing on the current situation and making sure that you do have the ability to communicate with your patients, your staff members, and also communicate with your patients the way they want to communicate. So that would be the biggest thing there. And if that wasn't fully responsive, chime back in the bar, because I will talk about a couple other things, but yeah.
What are a couple of features that Weave offers that dental specialist customers are especially needing at this time?
Yeah, that's another great question. Mally, can I unshare my screen here so I can show maybe some things as far as functionality?
Sure.
Perfect. So one of the main things that is absolutely necessary right now is, like I said, taking that functionality and essentially taking it remotely. So looking at something like a mobile app. So with your mobile app, you can actually, like I said, call patients. And one of the things that's important right now is with most ortho offices, they have, if you want to talk to the doctor, if this is an emergency, then you can call this cell phone number, and you're putting a cell phone number in the actual voicemail. So instead of saying something like, if you want to leave a voicemail, press 1. If you want to talk to the orthodontist on call, press 2. Where those phone calls can then be directly forwarded to the mobile app, where they can actually then remotely speak with patients, communicate with patients, also texting with patients. And then in a lot of the cases with some of our products that we have, you can see your actual schedule as well. So you can actually call with your schedule, and you can actually see essentially your entire schedule from your practice management system. You can call patients from there. I would also say one of the other things there is setting up a phone system that allows you to be flexible with call forwarding, being able to then communicate with patients that way as well. So Those are really the key pieces of that. Now, the other thing is pre-screening, COVID check-in. A lot of our offices, and I would say most of our offices, are now moving to pre-screening as far as checking in at curbside. Text the office when you get here. When we text you back, we'll check you in. We'll let you know when we're ready for you. Digital forms. No one wants to be passing around an iPad. No one wants to be passing around a clipboard in the office. So we can now digitize all of the forms for the office and tie that directly into the integral communication that you have with them, which is text messaging, that you can then send them a text message while they're sitting in their car in the parking lot, and it's completely contactless. And so those are really the big things right now, specifically, Mally, for the last 2.5 months that we've seen, is that type of curbside check-in communication with the paperless digital forms that allow less risk with the entire office.
How does Weave stand apart from other platforms? What makes it different?
Well, I think the biggest thing that separates Weave with everybody is the fact that when we started Weave, we started as a phone system. We weren't a random phone system, or we weren't a random company that started as a software company. We started our foundation 11 years ago as an actual digital VoIP provider. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is that we've built a software now on top of that that can combine with your phone system. One of the biggest things that we hear about is fragmentation. A lot of people are spending money on their phone provider. They're spending money on a reminder service. They're spending money on a texting service. And I think that was the biggest thing that we've had. And maybe that's why we grew a little bit slow at first, was because we were just a phone system, and that was essentially it. And that's what we turned everything into, was going from that phone system to now a software provider, where instead of doctors having to spend money on 2, 3, 4, 5 different companies, we can actually now pull all of that into one bill, to where you pay one company for that. And that's what I would think is probably the biggest thing that would separate us.
Okay, good. I have 2 questions that I'm going to make into one, especially for navigating COVID-19. It's, of course, a subject that's been predominantly affecting our offices. How are specialty offices using Weave to navigate COVID-19 specifically? How is the platform built for times such as these? I mean, this is a time that's different in history than we've ever had before, but there will be times with other issues that come up. And does Weave, in other ways, does Weave give you the ability to manage your office remotely?
Yeah, so perfect. I'm going to answer the first one. So when it comes to these particular times, and I think actually June 4th is a great time to talk about this, because I would say maybe at the beginning of May this wasn't the case, but I've had a lot of offices that I've been on the phone with, and my team's been on the phone with a lot of offices the last week or so, that are saying, once we got back in the office, everyone else kind of came out of lockdown too. So everything became much more high volume, a lot of phone calls, a lot of people saying we need to get in. And so with any of our Weave products, which we have 2 different Weave products, one of them is typically one that has a full integration with schedule, things like that. We also have another one where it still includes about 80% of the functionality, phone service, texting, everything like that, Google reviews, Facebook reviews. But we actually are able to get your patient information into the phone system, where when that person calls in, instead of your front office having to search through PBS Endo or OrthoTrack or any of those different services, we can actually pull that information up on the screen. So efficiency has been a huge thing the last little bit, especially with high volume of phone calls, things like that. Now, the second part of that is going to be contactless, whether it's payments, because we also have the ability to take payments contactless, where you can actually get a credit card through a text message. They can pay with Apple Pay, Android Pay, Samsung Pay, but then also digital forms, to where they can actually then fill a form out while they're sitting in their car or at the couch, on their couch at their house, and you can complete an entire medical history, insurance cards, anything like that, where they can actually then send paperless forms to the office. That's that part. And then, Mally, what was the third part of that question, real quick?
Was how does Weave give you the ability to manage your office remotely? That's why I put the questions together, because they were all about managing your office and not being in the office if something does happen to close offices again. Just I think we were all taken off guard with COVID-19 that offices were completely closed down and people did not have the ability to navigate their records. They couldn't make appointments. They didn't know what to do once they went back. So I think that you did answer the questions.
Okay. Yeah, I'll
Well,
just one more thing on that, Mally, real quick, if you don't mind, is the fact that the lifeblood of every single office, whether it's a general office or a specialty office or a medical office or a plastic surgery office or any office, is the phone system. And so I think what we've done with our mobile app and being able to digitize your entire phone system and allow that to be accessible through a mobile app where the doctor, the office manager, the office staff, anybody can have access to that phone system is the biggest thing. Now, with certain softwares, we can see schedules, we can call people from schedules, you can see all your faxes, everything like that from that mobile app. But that's one of the biggest things, is taking that phone system and that you may have with Comcast or Frontier or Spectrum or one of those, and just digitizing it and making basically your entire phone system at your office a smartphone.
It also looks like it's relationship building, because if you get somebody texting you, it's more of a, I can't be with you right now, but I do care about you, and I'll be back and I'll answer you in a certain amount of time, rather than sitting there and waiting and saying, oh, this office doesn't care, they're not answering me back quickly enough. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, and Mally, real quick on that one more time, and I don't have a dollar value on this, so I'm not going to quote it, but there's actually an oral surgeon, I believe, out of Texas that when we first released the missed call text, where that person may be calling at 6:30 at night, they call the office, they get the voicemail, sorry, the office is closed. If you want to leave a voicemail, we can return tomorrow, press 1. If you want to talk to the doctor, press 2. So when that person hits that voicemail and they're like, no, I'm just going to call back tomorrow, I don't really need to deal with this right now, they hang up. That text message can then go out to that patient, and that patient actually sends a text message back that said, great customer service, I need to get in for some services. And it ended up being in thousands and probably tens of thousands as far as the actual services themselves. I was an oral surgeon, but the fact that they were able to provide a good experience, and the doctor responded from the couch at his house saying, great, I'll have my office manager look at the schedule tomorrow, my scheduling coordinator look at the schedule tomorrow. And so that's another thing with that, is that customer service with the missed call text.
Before I ask the next question, do you want to tell us a little more about the special promotion that you're offering viewers of the webinar? It's so that they will know how to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So specifically right now with COVID, we want to help as much as we can, because I know business has been affected quite a bit lately. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to waive the cost of all the phones for any patient or any customer that actually comes on board with Weave. So we're actually sending out hardware for free. We're also going to waive $1,200 of the implementation. A lot of times people hear implementation and they think, oh, it's an activation, turn on and off switch. It's very different. We actually send someone out to your office, which a lot of VoIP providers don't do, but we actually send one of our partners that is one of our certified partners. They come out to your office. They get everything installed. We cover the cost of upgrades, routers, Ethernet drops, anything like that. So we're actually waiving that cost, $1,200 of that cost. So it's actually $750 for that implementation cost. And then we're also throwing in 1 free month for everybody with MedMark. So we're actually giving 1 free month for everybody that actually is affiliated with MedMark, because they've been a great partner of ours. And so basically free phones, $1,200 off your implementation, and then 1 free month for any MedMark affiliation.
Excellent. Our viewers will appreciate that. Another question, why did we build out a specialty team, and why do you feel the need to cater to specific specialties?
That is a great question. So 11 years ago when we were started by 2 sons of an office manager of a general office. And so everything we did at the very beginning of Weave was for general offices. And so everything that we did was for a general office. And about 2 or 3 years ago, like I mentioned at the beginning, was a lot of people now were coming out and saying, well, we want some of that same functionality. We want that phone system. We want that 2-way texting. We want to send reminders, confirmations, things like that. But I think anybody on this call would agree, and I would go to my grave saying this, is that you sell a general dentist a little bit different than you do an orthodontist. And when I say sell, I don't necessarily mean me giving you enough value so you buy my product. It's that you have different needs. And so if I were to say of the 5-6 specialties that we sell to, our team is specifically geared to talk to an endodontist or talk to an orthodontist or talk to a prosthodontist, periodontist, pediatric dentist. And that's why we built the team, was to make sure that we could capitalize on educating our customers the way they need to be educated, instead of me just going in endo office and saying, oh, great, perfect, you don't have Dentrix? Well, too bad. No, it's that we can still provide a ton of value, and we need to be able to show that we can provide that value.
Okay, a question from the audience. We just got all new phones in my office. Can we still use them?
Great question. So with Weave, the difference between our phones and other phones is that when they're built in the factory, because we have them built, they're built for our software. So let's say how many phones you have. Let's say you have 8. If you guys were to ever lose power, internet, anything like that, you'd have to re-provision those phones. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of us will offer these free phones to offices, is because we know you've made that investment, and we don't want you to feel like you have to make that investment again. Now, there are a lot of third-party sites that you can actually then resell those phones. With that, you can also use just our software only. So we have basically 2 products. So you have the phone service, you also have the software only service, which is still your two-way texting and things like that. So you have your reviews, everything you have within the software, but you would just lose that service. But the answer is no, you can't use your current phones with our service, because we actually take over your phone lines. We are your phone provider.
Okay, thank you. Another question from the audience. Can I use Weave to reach out to patients by text to fill my schedule when we reopen, rather than wait for them to call the office?
Yeah, I think there's a couple answers there. I think we do have certain softwares, and it would be interesting to hear what software you're using, but with certain softwares, we can actually set up recall. Now with Perio or something like that, you may have a little bit more of that, but you can actually reach out and get people to schedule or let them know that they're overdue for a certain appointment or something like that. We also have a quick fill list within Weave that you can set patients up. You can send a mass text up to 10 patients at a time and send those messages out. Now, I will say just real quick, with COVID and everything that's happened, a lot of spammers have come in and started sending out spam to people. So the carriers, Verizon, Comcast, AT&T, they've started locking down on mass texting from your office phone number, things like that. So you can send out basically bulk messages. I don't call it a mass text. It's not a mass text, it's a bulk message to get people back in the office.
Okay, before we close, I have one more question on a broader level. What would be your message regarding Weave that you would want to get out to our audience in a generalized way?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing for me is, Mally, I could have jumped on here and been like, hey, Weave this, Weave that, Weave, technology, Weave app. The biggest thing for me is just that, like, we're seeing the trends. I talk to offices every single day. Our team did, our 6-person sales team last month did over 350 demos with specialty offices. And so my biggest thing would be that with my presentation that I gave today, the biggest thing is just start embracing the technology and using the technologies that are out there. Now, I'll raise my hand and say, I hope you use Weave, because I do believe we're a superior product. And I think we do a lot of things really well. And I think we've changed a lot over the last 11 years. But my biggest thing would just be start embracing technology and communicating with your patients. I'm a 32-year-old guy. I want to communicate with my offices like a 32-year-old guy. And it's starting to trickle into other industries. So I would just say start embracing technology and start using technology. The second part of that would be embrace yourself, or if there's ever anything we've seen the last 3 months, have your office ready, because we have had a lot of offices scrambling. How fast can we get set up? How can we do this quicker? And so I would just say start embracing that technology now, getting ready for it.
Okay, we've thank you everybody for your questions, and thank you, Mike. It's been a great question and answer, but we've run out of time today. So if we did not get to your question, we will answer it after the webinar via email. But remember, we do have a special offer, a special price, and a promotional offer from the people at Weave. If you go to http://getweave.com/medmark. I'm going to say that again, http://getweave.com/medmark, and you can get your find out about your special offer there. And I wanted to thank you all for attending. A special thank you to Mike Hague and our sponsor for this webinar, Weave. Thank you all and have a wonderful day and stay safe out there.
Thanks, Valerie.